Joining us now to talk more about the political future of America's youth is Kiera O'Brien, a conservative commentator specializing in the views of Generation Z. So, Kiera, it's a real pleasure to have you on the program tonight. I want to ask you, because a lot of times we do focus on the future stars of the Democratic Party, and I feel like the Democrats do a good job of lifting up some of these figures. I mean, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a powerful figure. We see some of her progressive allies, Ilhan Omar. They do a good job of branding their future lawmakers. So, do you think that the Republican Party is doing enough in that effort?
Thanks for having me on tonight. No, I do not think that the GOP is doing enough to attract young voters to the party. The reality is that Generation Z is an ever-growing block within the voting electorate. There was a recent poll out of Harvard recently that says 63% of young voters in Generation Z are saying they are definitely voting this cycle, as opposed to 47% last cycle. So this is going to be a growing problem for the Republican Party if they fail to attract young voters.
I think you're exactly right, because, for example, I keep hearing the stat that millennials are becoming the most powerful voting bloc. It's something that everybody should have assumed was happening because they are demographically one of the most populous. But I also often hear Republicans that I talk to say, well, you know, younger people do start off more liberal, but as they get older, they become more conservative. But that doesn't necessarily to be the case. I mean, we are seeing a lot of states shifting their demographics. We do see a lot of those young people that are supposed to turn conservative not doing so necessarily. So what do you think the Republicans can do? Is it a matter of branding? Is it a matter of maybe addressing certain issues? What does it come down to?
I really think it comes down to addressing the issues that the younger generations care about. One of those issues that I'm particularly active on is climate change. It's a really simple issue for the Republican Party to do well on, since there's not an established platform. The Generation Z and millennials are not asking for a change in position. They're not Democrats on this issue either. They're asking for real, concrete Republican solutions to be offered, and it's a very simple measure that the party could take to attract these voters to the party and keep them there.
And I think you raise a very good point. For example, when I hear Senator Elizabeth Warren, for example, say, you know what, I want to do away with college loans or anything like that. I understand why that does appease to many young people. I understand why they would want to do that. But it's one of those policies that perhaps I'll let her talk about it when we ever get to that point. But it's not necessarily an outreach effort. And to your point, I do hear a lot of young conservatives still talk about climate change as well. I think maybe the old guard of the Republican Party used to say, you know what, let's ignore this issue. Let's just focus on the economy and that'll be enough. But the younger conservatives that I do talk to say, you know what, that's not enough because you're not changing minds. You have to be able to tell people that perhaps the best way to do that is through a free market approach in a way that doesn't do away with businesses or fossil fuels or anything like that. Do you think that's a strategy that should be adopted by the Republican Party?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I think. The reality is that the environment is an economy-wide issue. It's really an economic issue at its core. And if you implement a free market solution to address the problem, you can head off the liberal Green New Deal that is being proposed. So if we have an actual alternative in place that the Republican Party can champion, a free market climate solution, we can take the wind out of their sails on this.
And I think it comes back to an idea, too, that if you don't take a position, or at least a persuasive position, you're conceding that entire argument to the other side. I think it's also a problem that Republicans have right now with health care. I mean, the reason why Obamacare polls very high, the reason why even Medicare for all polls very high, is because there really isn't a Republican rebuttal to that regard. I mean, for example, we're talking about overturning Obamacare right now, and the whole idea of replacing it is the issue that Republicans can't necessarily seem to address. And I think that goes along with every other issue as well. So when it comes to issues like climate change, as you were bringing up, is the younger Republican Party different than the old guard Republican Party?
Yes, it's very much a generational issue. The younger generation of the Republican Party has grown up being taught the science of climate change, but they've also seen the Republican Party fail to address issues like health care, and I think there is a very real risk of the environment becoming the next health care, where the party does not offer a concrete alternative plan, and the American public then says, okay, well, the left has a plan. We don't like it very much, but we'll take that over no plan, which is very much what happened with health care and is what could happen with the environment.
And I hear a lot of supporters of President Trump say something along this lines, too, is that they didn't necessarily elect him to be the ivory tower that comes up with these ideas, but more so to highlight the problems that is taking place in Washington, D.C. And I think in that regard, he has been effective at pointing out, for example, times where bureaucracy gets in the way, times where there is a problem in government, but he's not necessarily the one who offers the solution. And I think that there is a question within the Republican Party as to what happens after President Trump, whether it's in 2020 or 2024. At some point, it is going to happen. So what do you think the Republican Party looks like after President Trump? Is it someone who's once again a fighter for a lot of these causes? Do you think it's a uniter? What do you think comes next?
I mean, I think we need to have a real intergenerational dialogue about this. There's a lot of issues that haven't been addressed that young conservatives would like to see addressed by the old guard. And it's not a complete replacement that we need or anything like that. I think it's just getting it squared on, are we a free market party? Are we a party that has a strong foreign policy or would rather not intervene? Like, we need to really look critically at what the future of our party is ideologically and then find candidates that match that.
And I think it's an important conversation to have because that conversation is being had on the other side of the aisle. I mean, we hear Democratic politicians talking about registering people as young as 16 years old, changing the voting age in order to get their enthusiastic base out there. I think Republicans need to start having not that conversation about lowering the voting age, but about getting the younger generation involved because there are a lot of young conservatives out there who right now, I mean, President Trump did bring back enthusiasm, but I don't necessarily see them going back and being super enthused about a Mitt Romney or anything like that who really doesn't make an outreach to them as well. I think you're bringing up very important points that the Republican Party needs to address. Kiera O'Brien, it's a real pleasure having you on this program tonight. Thank you.